تقرير حي للأحداث في حصص تحليلية مميزة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا في العالم.
العالم يتغير وبسرعة، ونحن نتابع وبدقة. نحاول الوصول إلى الحقيقة من مصدرها مباشرة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا في العالم.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has arrived at the new town of Sidi Abdallah in Algiers to kick off the nationwide housing distribution operation. The permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Mr. Ahmed Benjamin, has underlined the Zionist entity continues to use famine as a weapon of war in the Gaza Strip, affirming that the final objective of this policy is to push the population of Gaza out of their land. The death toll from the Zionist genocidal aggression against the Gaza Strip has risen to 37,953 reported facilities, with an additional 87,262 individuals sustaining injuries. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has arrived at the new town of Sidi Abdallah in Algiers to kick off the nationwide housing distribution operation. On his arrival at the entrance of the new town of Sidi Abdallah, the President of the Republic was welcomed by the Chief of Staff of the People National Army, Army General Zaid Chengreha, the Minister of the Interior, Local Authorities and Town and Country Planning, Mr. Brahim Mirad, and the Minister of Housing, Town Planning and the City, Mohamed Tariq Belgharibi, and the Wali of Algiers, Mohamed Abdelnour Rabihi. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has sent a message of congratulations to his Mauritanian counterpart, Mohamed Ould Sheikh Al Ghazouani, on the occasion of his re-election at the head of his sister country, the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, in which he expressed his permanent concern for consultation and coordination for the strengthening of brotherly ties and the strengthening of cooperation between the two countries. In his congratulation message, President Tebboune wished President-elect Ghazouani every success in the accomplishment of his noble missions after the brotherly Mauritanian people renewed their confidence in him to lead the country and continue the process of development under his enlightened leadership for the good, prosperity, security and stability of Mauritania. The head of the state reiterated his firm conviction and permanent concern for consultation and coordination with a view to strengthening the bonds of brotherhood and cooperation between our two countries, but also to promote our strategic partnership in the service of common interest to contribute to the realization of the aspirations of the two peoples in the Maghreb region and the Sahel for greater solidarity and complementarity in the climate of security and stability. The Minister of Energy and Mines, Mr. Mohamed Arkab, has received the Vice President of the World Bank for the Middle East and North African region, MENA, Mr. Ousmane Dion, and the accompanying delegation, with whom he discussed ways and means of strengthening bilateral cooperation through the exchange of expertise and technical support in renewable energy and development projects as part of Algeria's efforts to reduce its emissions, as well as in the energy and mining sector in general. Mohamed Khatel has the details.
During the meeting, which took place at the ministry's headquarters in the presence of its executives, who discussed the role of the energy and mining sector in meeting national energy needs such as electricity, gas and petroleum products, and long-term energy coverage through major electricity production and transmission projects. Mr. Arkab also recalled Algeria's contribution to global energy security, particularly at regional and African levels, notably in terms of the regularity, stability and reliability of gas exports through projects to increase production capacity at the development of hydrocarbon processing industries. For his part, Mr. Dion expressed his satisfaction with the meeting, which enabled him to learn about the prospects for the energy and mining sector in Algeria, notably with regard to the diversification of energy sources. The World Bank official hailed all the positive results achieved by Algeria in various fields, stressing that the World Bank was ready to intensify its cooperation and exchanges with Algeria, notably in the field of renewable energy development, through the setting up of a task force to study the possibilities of wind energy development in the country. Mr. John hailed Algeria's performances recorded and recognized by the international development community, which allowed Algeria's position to be upgraded, describing them as a model of success that deserves to be shared with other countries in Africa and the MENA region. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Al-Aziz Fayed and Mr. John exchanged during the meeting common views on economic development in a global context characterized by multifaceted crises.
Addressing the audience at the end of Tuesday's screening of documentary film Sheikh Al-Harbi Al-Tbesi in Shahid Sans Sépulture at the Algiers Cinematheque to mark the 62nd anniversary of Independence Day and Youth Day, the Minister of War Veterans, Rabega, has said that his sector grants great importance to audiovisual documentation, which is a major focus and a means of publicizing the history of our glorious revolution.
The Ministry of War Veterans, in coordination with the Ministry of Communication, are aware of the importance of the media in conveying our historical message. That's why we are distributing cinematographic productions that convey our true history to the national public and private media, as well as to foreign media accredited in Algeria. All the content will be produced in this context, in addition to the 62nd anniversary of our independence, which also concerns the 17th anniversary of the outbreak of the revolution through a very specific program.
Mr. Rabega announced that his sector is in the process of producing other audiovisual works to mark the 62nd anniversary of the Independence Day and Youth Day celebrations, in addition to programming other works to mark the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of the Liberation Revolution, hence the importance of producing these works properly, using the potential of young people with the aim of documenting everything to do with national history. At a meeting with the representatives of the sports media at the conference hall of the Mohamed Boudiaf Sports Complex in the company of the Minister for Youth and Sport, Abdurrahman Hamad, and in the presence of the chairman of the Audiovisual Regulatory Authority, Mohamed Luber, heads of the national media, representatives of the two chambers of parliament and the Media Library Corporation, as well as academics, Mr. Lahagab said that the meetings he had been supervising recently with the heads and representatives of the national media were intending to explore ways and means of promoting the performance of national media, strengthening them and enabling them to play a leading role, at least in the regional environment.
National and foreign media companies need credible historical content, especially now that the Information Act and the Audiovisual Act provide a framework for media companies which must adapt to these new laws, whether for generalist or thematic channels. Today, these historical productions represent a qualitative contribution to the media which must draw inspiration from them and thus convey our national memory in a professional manner.
The Minister of Communication also reminded the National Media Corporation, in particular the sports media, of the need to respect the fundamentals of professional ethics and deontology in journalism, stressing the imperative of promoting the level of sport media performance through the compliance with the new legal text governing the sector. The President of the National Human Rights Council, Abdelmajid Zalani, has affirmed here in Algiers that Algeria has made great strides in the process of promoting in recent years. Mohamed Khatil has more details in this report.
Guest of the forum of the daily Ashab, Mr. Zalani specified that these advances were made thanks to the guarantees of the 2020 Constitution relating to the protection and promotion of rights, while reaffirming the importance of continuing to examine the remaining draft laws, such as that on associations. Mr. Zalani also insisted on the acceleration of the promulgation of the implementing texts of the related laws in order to complete the process of the state's efforts in terms of enshrining fundamental rights. After emphasizing that the CNDH's annual report for 2023 was currently being drafted, the president of the CNDH called for the need to continue action to finalize the digitization project, which constitutes, according to him, the only alternative to eliminate the phenomenon of bureaucracy and mismanagement, being an obstacle preventing the guarantee of quality service to the citizens. Recalling that the Council endeavors to enable citizens to fully enjoy and exercise their rights, particularly the political rights, Mr. Zalani insisted on raising citizens' awareness of the importance of voting as a means of bringing about the change they aspire to. On the same occasion, the president of the CNDH indicated that the state of human rights in our country was also reflected by the achievements of Algerian diplomacy, which did not fail to defend the rights of peoples to development and self-determination in all international fora.
The commission set up by the coalition of parliamentary majority parties, the National Liberation Front, FLN, the National Democratic Rally, RND, and the El Mustaqbal Front, met at the RND headquarters in Algiers. In a speech delivered on the occasion, the RND Secretary General Mustafa Yahi said that the consultation and coordination meeting reflects the concern of the three political parties to serve the people and the country for a promising future, stressing that the work of this party is continuing with a view to holding a national conference on July 30th. On the occasion, Mr. Yahi invited the political elites to participate in the presidential election on September 7th by stepping up grassroots actions and mobilizing citizens. He also praised Algeria's achievement in recent years, reiterating his party's commitment to standing by the state and its institutions. The permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Amr Benjamin, has underlined that the Zionist entity continues to use famine as a weapon of war in the Gaza Strip, affirming that the final objective of this policy is to push the population of Gaza out of their land. He added that no one in Gaza is enjoying food security, and the impact of blocking aid from entering the besieged enclave is apparent and obvious.
People in Gaza are starving to death. This is the worst situation even documented. No one in Gaza is in food security. Yes, no one. The impact of blocking humanitarian aid from entering Gaza is seen in videos on social media. The consequences of blocking aid are shown in the faces of all the people in Gaza, 2.2 million people who are suffering from famine.
Mr. Benjamin stressed during his intervention at the Security Council session devoted to Middle East and Palestine that 9 months after the start of the Zionist aggression against the defenseless population of Gaza, the humanitarian situation there is catastrophic, on account of the starvation policy adopted by the occupation authority. He referred to the report of the World Food Programme, which indicated that famine in Gaza can only be avoided by guaranteeing immediate and complete access to the north of the Palestinian enclave, adding that hunger and fear are used to bring Palestinians on their knees and to transform their lives into a real hell, underlining on the occasion the destruction of the Rafah crossing, which is out of service, and the obstacles imposed by the occupation authorities on the delivery of humanitarian aid. Mr. Benjamin also deplored the impossibility for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, to carry on its operation in the Gaza Strip, stressing that it is unacceptable that UNRWA, which he describes as irreplaceable, continues to be subjected to attacks.
Today, distribution of humanitarian aid remains a major concern. UNRWA, the backbone of humanitarian action in Gaza, is prevented to operate throughout the Gaza Strip. We noticed that UNRWA was almost absent from the briefing we have heard today. In this regard, a legitimate question should be asked on the plans for this agency, whose mandate is vital for the Palestinian people.
The Algerian ambassador to the UN also assured that the Zionist occupying forces continue their attacks against the local Palestinian police during humanitarian aid delivery operations to the extent that one wants to take the risk of escorting humanitarian aid convoys because they will be targeted by the occupying forces. Mr. Benjamin concluded by saying that urgent actions must be taken to save the lives of Palestinians who are threatened by hunger and disease, adding that without urgent action, the world will witness a humanitarian tragedy that will be written in the darkest page of history. The death toll from the Zionist genocidal aggression against the Gaza Strip has risen to 37,953 reported fatalities, with an additional 87,262 individuals sustaining injuries. Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, resulting in the documented killing of at least 28 Palestinians and the injury of 125 others. Meanwhile, the senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator for Gaza, Sigrid Kaag, stressed that there are now 1.9 million displaced people in the Gaza Strip, which has been subjected to genocidal Zionist aggression for 270 days. Mrs. Kaag told UN headquarters that more than 1 million people are once again displaced in search for shelter and safety. She added that she was deeply concerned by the new evacuation orders issued in Gaza by the Zionist forces. For its part, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees estimated that 250,000 Palestinians would be forced to leave the town of Khan Yunis in the south of the Gaza Strip. 4 people were killed in a strike by the Israeli occupation forces in Noor Shems refugee camp near the town of Tulkarem in the north of the occupied West Bank. Operation by the Israeli occupation forces and violence increased. Meanwhile, a group of Israeli settlers under the protection of Israeli occupation police broke into Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Al-Quds. Dozens of settlers entered the holy sites in groups, conducted provocative tours throughout the compound and performed Talmudic rituals. The World Health Organization (WHO) has voiced concern that lack of fuel deliveries to the water and Gaza Strip risk disruption to critical health services. Majid Bila has more details in this report.
World Health Organization Regional Director for the Eastern Mediterranean Hanan Balkhi said that Gaza's healthcare sector alone requires 80,000 liters of fuel every day to function, but only 195,000 to 200,000 liters last arrived at the end of June. Since then, no fuel has entered Gaza via the Karm Abu Salem border crossing. She explained that the shipment had to be shared by all sectors, including water, sanitation and hygiene, requiring 70,000 liters a day. Mrs. Balkhi stressed that as a result, hospitals are once again short on fuel, risking disruption to critical services, and injured people are dying because ambulance services are facing delays due to shortage of fuel. Meanwhile, WHO representative for occupied Palestine territory, Richard Peppercorn, said that the latest evacuation orders have an impact on operations at the European Gaza hospital in Khan Yunis, even though the hospital itself is not under evacuation orders, noting that 270 patients along with medical staff evacuated the hospital following occupation orders.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, has called for help for refugees fleeing the war in Sudan to Libya and Uganda following an increase in arrivals in these countries. More details in this report by Majid Mila.
United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees planning document published on Tuesday shows that the United Nations agency expects to receive 149,000 people in Libya before the end of the year. It's forecasting 55,000 people for Uganda, which has no direct border with Sudan and is already hosting 1.7 million refugees and asylum seekers from other crises. Humanitarian aid in Sudan is suffering from a lack of resources in a context of record humanitarian needs due to multiple crises around the world and the withdrawal of certain donors due to national budgetary constraint. The United Nations plan is less than 20% funded. Meanwhile, more than 55,000 people have fled the town of Sinjar in southeast Sudan as fighting rages between paramilitary forces and the army, according to a report by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. The report was published on Monday, 2 days after the Rapid Support Forces announced that they had captured an army base in Sinjar, the capital of Sina state, where witnesses reported fighting and thousands of people fleeing. People fleeing the town of Sinjar have arrived in the states of Jidaref, Blue Nile, Wild Nile and Kassala, it added. OCHA said that humanitarian groups in Jidaref, near Sudan's eastern border with Ethiopia, have begun to prepare for the arrival of people fleeing Sinjar. But Jidaref is already home to more than 600,000 displaced people, according to the United Nations.
Dick Schoof, who has sworn in as Netherlands Prime Minister at the head of a right-wing coalition government. Mr. Schoof succeeds Mark Rutte, who has been in power since 2010. Rutte has been Secretary General of NATO. The new Dutch Prime Minister presented his ministers to Dutch King Willem-Alexander in a royal palace in The Hague. Each took a step to pledge allegiance to the sovereign and to the Constitution. That's it for today's News Bulletin. I invite you now to listen to a special program by Asya Bakar. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.